And joining us now, the MLA for Timberlea-Prospect, who is also running for the provincial Liberal leadership that will be decided in February. We're pleased to welcome Iain Rankin to Telile 24/7. Iain, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure to be here.
No trouble at all. Let's begin with the obvious question. What made you decide to seek the leadership? Why are you running?
I'm running to continue what I think is a strong record. Our government has made some progress fiscally and with strong population and economic numbers. But I think we need to start tackling things like the climate change and social justice. So it's been a part of my campaign to very much focus on making sure that when we rebound from this pandemic and keeping our focus on that pandemic, that we also look at a strong economic recovery that's more low carbon and socially inclusive.
Well, I'd like to concentrate on that for just a little bit. I know you've made that a key plank in your campaign. You are, of course, up until just recently, Nova Scotia's Minister of Environment. So can you tell me a little bit about what specific ideas you have to promote climate change and to promote renewable energy should you become the Liberal leader?
Yeah, and certainly I did have experience in cabinet with both environment and lands and forestry, but I also, from a generational perspective, I think I'm very in tune with what needs to happen and what people want to see for a future. We've done some good work with emissions reductions. I want to continue that work by doubling our renewable energy from just under 40% to 80% by 2030. And also part of my campaign, I've talked about net zero buildings and looking at how we can have even better efficiency programs. And then the other two planks are around conservation, increasing our land protection beyond the current 13% target, implementing the Leahy report. And then on the transportation component, I would be incentivizing more electric vehicles and helping municipalities electrify their own public transportation, as well as supporting active transportation.
Now, when you mentioned the Leahy report, of course, we're talking about the report of former University of King's College President Bill Leahy concerning Nova Scotia's forestry. Forestry is very important to our neck of the woods, the Strait of Canso region at home to Port Hawkesbury Paper, one of the biggest forestry companies in the entire province right now. I just wonder, focusing on that and drawing on your experience as the Minister of Lands and Forestry, what's your sense of what needs to be implemented right away from the Leahy report, and what impact would you like to see that make on how we conduct our forestry here in Nova Scotia?
So the paradigm is ecological forestry that we've been moving towards. There are interim measures in place now that mandate minimum retention. And so I've actually seen firsthand a lot of the management of land in Cape Breton by Port Hawkesbury Paper. They are a strong employer and part of our economy here, and they should be here for generations to come. We continue to work well. They have a seat at our ministerial advisory committee that continues with that department, and we'll need to implement it in a thoughtful way. There's 45 recommendations, and one of the foundational pieces is a change to a new modern forest management guide, and those discussions continue. It's still in the consultation phase to ensure that we're fully aware of the different forest types that are in Cape Breton, like the maritime boreal forest, which has special considerations.
All right. Iain, I wanted to ask you this, and I will tie this into our current conversation about forestry management. You presided over one of the more difficult decisions executed by any provincial government in the past 5 to 10 years from where I'm sitting, the enforcement of the cleanup of the effluent treatment plant at Boat Harbour by Northern Pulp based in Pictou County. That came through just a year ago. You and Stephen McNeil, the current Premier, were very, very firm about this. And as a result, Northern Pulp made an announcement almost simultaneously to that announcement that it would look at shutting down the facility. It's currently in hot idle. Now, Northern Pulp is still trying to reopen the facility, but I want to ask you, do you feel that your experience in sticking to your guns on that particular position with regard to effluent treatment will work well for you, not just in terms of what we're discussing here for forestry management and for climate change, but also in terms of your overall leadership style? Can you connect A to B in that regard?
For sure. I think I've always shown courage on those files. That is a historical wrong and an example of environmental racism. We made a personal commitment from the Premier and our government to close Boat Harbour. It wasn't the first time the province of Nova Scotia committed to Pictou Land and First Nation that we would close that facility. We did give the company some time, a number of years, 4 or 5 years, to get their plan in place and go through the regulatory process. They weren't able to get that approved through the Department of Environment and the staff that analyzed that. And so we had to keep our commitment. And I know I was have asked from the industry to consider looking at an extension. And I was always upfront with them and making sure that they knew that we were going to keep our commitment. It was not only the right thing to do because of the historic wrong with the First Nations, but environmentally, I think most Nova Scotians want to see the industry become more sustainable, which if they have another plan that they're going to put forward, it needs to meet the current guidelines and the current regulations that are in place today.
All right. In that spirit, Iain, I'd like to ask you, how would you describe your personal leadership style to Nova Scotians? You're doing a selling job to Liberal members right now. If you're successful in your campaign, you'll be doing a selling job to Nova Scotians from one end of the province to the other. What do we get if we get Premier Iain Rankin in February?
You get someone that enjoys collaboration. I really think that the strength of my team, a number of my colleagues have endorsed me because they know they will have a strong say, and I like to build up strengths of members of the team. And you get someone that does have courage when we take positions. I think the leader of the province should be firm in his resolve, and when we're dealing with some very difficult issues. So that's one of the areas that I do admire about the Premier Stephen McNeil, when he took a stand on difficult issues, whether it's labor or other cost measures that we needed to put in place to tackle the budget and the deficit that we inherited. That's the kind of leadership that you would see continue. But we'd also see someone that's really wanting to work together with other levels of government and communities to tackle some of the real complex societal issues that the province is facing today.
All right. You mentioned the deficit that was inherited from the previous NDP government, and I want to touch on relief for those affected by COVID-19, partly because the relief efforts that your government has unfolded over the last 10 months have helped to contribute to a large deficit that now looms and that you'll have to deal with as Premier if you are successful. So can you tell me how you intend to balance those two glaring realities? Not only that we are still in the middle of a pandemic, it has hit people individually and from a business perspective, especially on the economic front, but by the same time, the bills have to be paid and the red ink has to be paid down. How do you balance those two should you become Premier?
Yeah, I believe in balanced budgets when we're not in a recession or we're not in a state of emergency. But this is the time that we need to help people. So we've put programs in place to fill gaps left behind from the federal assistance programs. We're going to need to spend to get out of this in this budget. We're going to have another deficit for this year and maybe the following year. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't continue with strong fiscal prudence. We should be looking at a program review as we're spending to make sure that we're looking at government spending in every department and work our way back to that balance. I think it's important to invest to stimulate growth, but we also need to be mindful that we should never be getting ourselves back into a structural deficit and incurring some programs and spending and borrowing that from future generations.
Yeah. All right. I wanted to ask you about your perspective for Cape Breton Island, and particularly our part of Cape Breton Island. Telile is based in Richmond County. We cover Richmond County and the towns of Port Hawkesbury and Mulgrave. By the same token, we do have viewership up in urban Cape Breton, Sydney, Glace Bay, New Waterford. I just wonder if there are any parts of your campaign and of your particular vision for Nova Scotia going forward into 2021 that could really have an impact in southern Cape Breton and the Strait of Canso area in general.
Well, I mentioned in my economic recovery plan a number of planks, all which have connection to Cape Breton, but especially we would have an economic growth council with membership from someone, at least one person from the island, to ensure that regional interest is brought to the table. But also I want to have stronger links with the business community and with our post-secondary institutions and NSCC, and the Ocean Institute that's there is a very strong program that we can build upon, and making sure that we're supporting the training. And also, you mentioned Port Hawkesbury Paper. That's another employer that we need to work with. So there's still opportunities there. Cape Breton as a whole is a world-class tourist destination, and we need to come out of this with a plan to build back the markets and make sure that we're competing as best we can. And that means looking at investments in placemaking and working on making sure we're making the most of projects like the Cape Smoky project, like what's happening in around Inverness, and how do we build across the whole island to make sure that we're continuing to brand the Cape Breton Island as one of the best places in the world to visit.
All right, just one more question for you, Iain, and that is, how is your message being received? You're in a three-way race for the Premier's job with fellow former Cabinet Ministers Labi Kasulis and Randy Delory. How do you feel that Liberal members and ordinary Nova Scotians are receiving your messages on climate change, on leadership, and on yourself in general as we head into the home stretch of the campaign?
Very well. I've been having positive conversations from Yarmouth to Sydney. I am from Cape Breton, and I think Cape Bretoners know that I very much care about their interests, and also that I do believe in a strong capital city. My seat where I represent, Timberlea, where I grew up, is just on the outskirts of town, but a strong Halifax is good for Nova Scotia. A strong Sydney is the second biggest urban center, will be good for Nova Scotia. And our rural communities, I think, are really starting to see that me as a champion of their interests, understanding how the forestry sector is important. That goes for agriculture, fisheries, mining, the traditional sectors, making sure that we're investing in innovation for those industries, and also looking at what's next for our blue economy and how that's relevant to Cape Breton, and looking at the opportunities in digital. I really believe that we are on the cusp of breaking through now that we're in a good foundational place alongside Quebec and Ontario. We're the third province listed in the budgetary officer as being fiscally sustainable. So let's take advantage of that opportunity and build into 2020.
All right. Well, we want to thank you for taking a couple of moments to speak to us today. We wish you well in the rest of the campaign, and we wish you and your family all the very best for the holiday season as well. Thank you so much, Iain Rankin.
Likewise, and to you and all your viewers, I really appreciate this opportunity, and be well over the holidays.